Finding it difficult to work with numbers may be a sign of Alzheimer's.
Are you okay?
An early diagnosis can help improve the quality of life for your loved one. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's. Some things come with age, some other.
You catch last night's city council meeting? There was some pretty exciting stuff.
I don't have cable or a computer, just a phone. Staying off the grid.
You don't need cable or a computer. You can just access it from your phone.
Say what?
Yeah, just go to townsquare.tv, click the live on demand button, and choose the meeting you want to watch.
Say what?
Yeah, you can watch the meetings live or later in our meeting archives.
That's cool. But did you know that now all the videos on the Town Square Television website can be viewed on your mobile device?
Say what?
Yeah, that means you can watch sports, shows, news, and events directly on our website.
Say what?
Shh, we need to run.
By the way, what are we even running from?
I don't know, but it's enticing.
Welcome to the fourth biennial Chamber of Commerce sponsored Minnesota Congressional District 2 debate. In a world where there is often divide, let's start with what unites us by joining and reciting our Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you're able and face our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Krista Jeck. I'm the president of the Lakeville Chamber of Commerce. I would like to welcome our candidates and those in the audience, including several media outlets, to our historic downtown Lakeville. I do suggest after we're done this morning, we have half a dozen restaurants in walking distance, so I recommend late breakfast over at Better Half or a burger at B52 or Lakeville Brewing. Enjoy our historic downtown while you're here.
And Krista, coming to Lakeville today is kind of like coming to a Hallmark movie. It's kind of impressive. I like that.
It is a little bit.
Given the traditional high energy of this debate, I might suggest you might also consider heading a little further east to Farmington's Bourbon Butcher that later on this afternoon and stepping up to their well-known bar. It might be just a ticket for some of you in the audience to wind down, but regardless of where you are, please visit your local chamber members to boost their local economies after this debate. So I'm John Altoff, President and Chief Mission Officer of the Dakota County Regional Chamber of Commerce of Minnesota. We represent 9 cities. Our largest are Eagan, Farmington, Mendota Heights, Rosemont, West St. Paul, and we have 3 townships within Dakota County as well. And even though Krista and I hail from Lakeville and the DCR Chamber, we're here today representing the other 13 CD2 chamber partners in Apple Valley, Burnsville, Cottage Grove, Elko New Market, Hastings, Lonsdale, Montgomery, New Prague, Northfield, Prior Lake, River Heights, Savage, and Shakopee. And October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I'm wearing pink today, as I do every day in October, just to remind everybody that early detection saves lives.
Very good, John. Today's debate is an opportunity to educate and engage our voters from the Minnesota Congressional 2 District. Our district is historically a highly watched race for Congress in the country, and we are very honored to have the 2 major party candidates with us here today. So Angie Craig and Joe Teirab, thank you both for your desire to serve our district and for being here with us today. We would also like to recognize some of the people that helped make this event possible. To the beautiful Lakeville Arts Center staff, Town Square Television for live streaming the debate, WNAV for our sound production, our video production teams at both the cities of Burnsville and Lakeville, our Lakeville Police Department, the campaign teams for both of our candidates, and all others who have played a role in this today. And we are live streaming this event and will be available for viewing after the fact, so please contact your local chamber for details on that. For those that are watching live, feel free to tweet and post on social media using hashtag MN02.
This is the only time we ask the audience to be on their phone, if you're tweeting or sending social media posts. The Chambers of Commerce are the voice of business, and we serve to strengthen our communities. The chambers in Congressional District 2 are incredibly powerful. We have over 3,000 collective members, and we provide over 100,000 jobs, which have created the third largest economy region in Minnesota.
And that's why we're here today, to represent them. So first, we'd like to welcome our two timekeepers that are with us today. Ren Johnson is the Student Senate Advocacy Director from Inver Hills Community College. And Bethany Mejia Elias, did I get it? Okay, I got it, yep. Is our Student Senate President at Dakota County Technical College. So as you see, candidates, we've gotten these people out here a little excited about food. You're now the only thing standing between them and lunch. So these guys are gonna keep you on task, all right?
So prior to today's debate, our audience, which consists of chamber members throughout the district, college students, and various media personnel, we've been asked to adhere to the guidelines that have been provided and handed out to each of you today. They will allow respectful exchange of positions by our candidates uninterrupted. Those who do not comply with the code of conduct may be asked to leave, and hopefully, Krista, that won't extend to our candidates.
Or you, John.
Or me. That is a risk. Please remember to silence your cell phones now.
Okay, so the format for today's debate is going to go as follows. Written questions were submitted in advance by our sponsoring chamber members, and the candidates have been given the topics that we are going to discuss today, but they have not been given the questions. And the speaking order was determined by via a numerical generator. So we will start with two opening comments where they will have 2 minutes each. They will rotate the order with each question. Each candidate will answer every question, and candidates will be given 90 seconds to answer their questions. Each candidate will then have 30 seconds to respond if desired, and we will end the debate with closing comments, 2 minutes per candidate. The timekeepers will alert you of time by holding up colored cards, a yellow one when you have 15 seconds remaining, and a red card when your time is complete. And a reminder to our live audience, we ask that there be no applause or interruptions during the debate out of respect for our candidates.
But, Krista, we're going to have an exception to that, because right now we're asking for a round of applause for our candidates who've taken the time to meet with us today.
All right, let's get going. So we are going to start with opening comments. Candidates, again, you have 2 minutes each, and Angie Craig, you will go first.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, John and Krista, for moderating the debate. And thank you to the Regional Chamber and the 13 partner chambers from across the 2nd Congressional District. I just want to start by acknowledging that today is October 7th, and that is the one-year anniversary of the brutal murder and terroristic actions in Israel, and we're spending the day remembering. You know, I grew up in a trailer home. Some of you may remember that from some of my earlier campaigns. And I left that trailer home to go to a state college, and I remember, because all those years ago, you could actually go and work a couple of jobs and take out a little bit of student loans and actually pay for your state college. I worked my way up through 22 years of working in business, and the last 12 years here in Minnesota, before I stepped out to run for Congress, I was actually an executive with St. Jude Medical right here in the Twin Cities. As part of that, I represented the company on the St. Paul Chamber of Commerce, so I feel like it's a bit of a homecoming today. My wife Cheryl and I, we now have 4 adult sons, if you can believe it or not. The youngest is 21 years old and a senior in college, but he graduated 3 years ago from Rosemont High School, and we are so grateful to our teachers and educators in our communities. We now also have 3 grandsons. The youngest was born 2 months ago, and we are so excited to now have a 3-year-old Noah, a 1-year-old Wyatt, and then 2-month-old little Levi. So becoming a grandmother has been significant. The 2nd District of Minnesota has been our home. This is where we go to church, where we play, where we have so many friends, and it would be truly an honor to continue to represent you in the 2nd District. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Joe, you may begin.
Well, thank you so much, John and Krista, for hosting this debate. Thank you, Congresswoman, for being here, and thank you, everyone, for being here from the Dakota County Chamber. I have to note, yes, that today is October 7th, and it is very sobering to know that 1 year ago, Israelis were brutally murdered, and we need to stand with Israel and stand on the side of righteousness and justice. For those of you who don't know me, I was born and raised here in Minnesota. I grew up in a small town in Windham. My dad worked at a beef processing plant. He's an immigrant from Sudan. I was honored to serve in the United States Marine Corps for 5 years on active duty as a JAG officer. I deployed to the Middle East where we faced faced ISIS, similar to what we were seeing with Hamas. Then I was honored to serve as a federal prosecutor where I worked with law enforcement hand in hand to put bad guys behind bars across the state of Minnesota. And I'm running for United States Congress because I can't sit idly by while I feel like the American dream that I've been blessed to live is slipping away. And we're seeing that on the economy with a Biden-Harris agenda, in my view, that has poured gas on the inflation fire, rubber stamped by Congresswoman Craig. And we're seeing middle-class families getting crushed by inflation with reckless spending bill after reckless spending bill. We're seeing an open border. We're seeing rise in crime and fraud out of control in Minnesota. And that's personal to me as someone who worked hand in hand with law enforcement to put some of those people behind bars. I think we can go a new direction because I believe in America. I believe in bipartisanship. I believe in common sense. That's why we can all come together as people who are in this room, who are job creators, who are focused on just adding value to our society. We can do that, but we can only do that if we're doing it together, and that's why I'm running for Congress.
Thank you both. We'll now begin with questions. John.
And the first question I have to ask is, do you both support the 5-0 Minnesota Vikings?
Woo!
All right.
Yes.
And the Lynx.
I'll just do it right here now.
And the Lynx that are going to eclipse the sun tomorrow night, right?
That's right.
And what about those Gophers? You're supporting of the Gophers,
I'm
right?
a big Gopher fan, and I will neither confirm nor deny whether or not I stormed the field in 2019 when our Gophers beat Penn State.
All right, well, we're going to get into a question that you may not, questions that there may not be agreement on, so let's dig into that. The first one's on economic development and jobs. So many of our businesses are still recovering from the pandemic. What role do you see the federal government playing in incentivizing economic growth in our district, especially in rural and underserved areas? And we'll start with Joe, 90 seconds.
Well, the government has a big role in that the government should have a big role in stepping back and letting job creators and small businesses do their job. I think the biggest problem in 2020 and afterwards, after the pandemic, was that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris said that they needed to step up their game and pass reckless spending bill after reckless spending bill. And again, those were all passed and voted for by Congresswoman Craig. And those bills remind you, Bill Clinton's economic advisor and Barack Obama's economic advisor said that these bills were the most irresponsible macroeconomic policies of the last 40 years. And Congresswoman Craig voted for those bills, and that threw gas on the inflation fire, making it harder for small businesses to grow and innovate. And so my goal is to put more and more money in the pockets of middle-class families and small businesses so they can take that money and put it back into innovation, to put it back into research and development. And so as I talk to business owners and families across the 2nd District, my goal is to put more money into your pocket. Because I know, as someone who worked as a federal prosecutor on the Feeding Our Future investigation, the government doesn't do a great job generally on spending money. You spend the best job on money that you're getting. We need to make sure we're putting money into your pockets to let our economy thrive.
Thank you. Angie, you have 90 seconds to answer the same question.
Well, when I was an executive at St. Jude Medical, I remember we worked with Governor Tim Pawlenty in particular to get a new bridge so that we could agree to build our corporate headquarters, rebuild our corporate headquarters here. And my experience has been in business that when you have a strong public-private partnership, the public side investing in infrastructure, like the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that oftentimes private sector investment follows that. I've been very focused because I know businesses in this district, 93% of businesses here are small businesses. I've been very focused on how do we lower cost, whether that's lowering the cost of prescription drugs or lowering the cost of gasoline through year-round E15, which also supports our family farmers, or how do we put a little more money into our seniors' pockets by ending federal taxes on Social Security. Now, Joe, my opponent, has actually said that he wants to raise the retirement age, and he thinks that we should look at privatizing Social Security. I adamantly disagree with that. And at the end of the day, I've stood with so many of you during those times in 2020. In fact, it was under President Trump that I served, and we passed Paycheck Protection Program money in this district to make sure that many of our local businesses survived during that difficult time period. And as your member, I'm always going to listen to you, just like I listened to the chamber when I said we needed to include 501c6 businesses in that program.
Thank you. Joe, you may have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And Congresswoman Craig, you know that that's a false attack. You've made false attacks against me as proven by KSCP and WCCO. My parents are on Social Security. Of course, I don't want to cut Social Security benefits or raise the retirement age. That was a clip that was taken out of context. What I've talked about from the beginning of this race is I'm focused on middle-class families, like the one I came from. My parents are on Social Security. The last thing I want to do is focus on that. The one thing I want to focus on is putting more money in your pockets. I think the economic pie should grow. That's what my focus is going to be on.
Angie, you may have 30 seconds to respond.
Well, I couldn't bring a phone up here or I would have brought the recording, Joe. What you said was, at a certain point, you have to change what the retirement age is going to be. And I appreciate that you're walking that back now, but this was at a campaign event called Pints and Politics in this congressional district. I understand you're trying to walk it back, but it's actually on tape, so it's kind of tough to do it.
Okay, thank you both. We'll move on to the next question. Krista.
We're going to talk about taxes and regulation. Minnesota has some of the highest business taxes in the nation, and this is something that we hear consistently from our small businesses as chamber presidents. How would you address the balance between federal, state, and local tax burdens for businesses, especially our small and medium-sized enterprises, to help them be more competitive? Angie, you will go first with this one, 90 seconds.
Sure. I've actually introduced a bill to lower the tax rate on small businesses in the 2nd Congressional District. Right now, the federal tax rate is 21%. I have a bill that would lower that to 18% on any business, the first $400,000 in revenue up to a $5 million business. So I've thought deeply about this. You know, my mom was a teacher for almost 40 years, but during that time growing up too, she also owned a small business, a dress shop. So I get it, and lowering business tax rates are really important to me. The other thing that I think we have to think about, because we're balancing it, is the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act capped state and local tax deductions at $10,000, and I think we should raise that rate. I think that was one of the main issues with the 2017 bill that President Trump and the Republican-controlled Congress at the time passed. And so this is something that I would be looking at, because in 2025 we have a number of tax issues that we're going to have to address as a nation. And there were some good changes with that. You know, I'm ranked by Common Ground Committee as in the top 3% of all bipartisan members of Congress. So things like increasing the standard deduction, some of the changes for small business owners, extending the ACA tax credits, I'm going to be open to working with my Republican colleagues to keep a number of those items into the new year.
Thank you, Angie. Joe?
Yeah, we know that Minnesota is one of the most tax disadvantaged states in our country. Some outlets have it as 44 out of 50 states in terms of our tax business climate. That's just unacceptable. We cannot have the federal government pouring it on at that point. So there's a couple things we have to do. One, we cannot engage in reckless spending bill after reckless spending bill like we did with the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden agenda that Congresswoman Craig, you voted for, that was the least responsible macroeconomic policy in the last 40 years that caused inflation. So we cannot have that. But what we have to do is pass tax relief for middle-class families. And this begins with extending the 2017 tax cuts, which, Angie Craig, I understand that you're against. And I am for a 20% small business deduction that those tax cuts brought for sole proprietorships, partnerships, and S-corps. I'm for reducing those taxes for individual tax rates, for increasing the standard deduction that I understand that we're both for. But we need to make sure that we're also making the full deduction for certain capital investments that, I was having a conversation with a small business owner over in Scott County. He talked about how, hey, the more money the government takes, the less we can put into research and development and innovation. And that's real. That's real for them. It's real for their employees. It's real for our economy. I want to, like I said, make our economic pie grow. That's what we should be focused on you actually providing jobs and spurring our economy.
Thank you, Angie. 30 seconds if you'd like.
Yeah, so I do think there are elements of the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act that we should keep. Certainly the standard deduction was a good change. Making the R&D tax credit permanent is something that I'm going to be working toward in the new year. And the 20% small business tax deductions, I support that, in addition to lowering the tax rate from 21 to 18% on many, many small businesses. So, I served on a chamber. I helped build a business from about $1 billion to $5 billion in revenue over 22 years. So I look forward to working with my business community.
One thing that business owners talk to me about, and for sure those in our ag economy, is just the price of inputs. And those went up with inflation going up. And again, we need to go back to the nexus of why we had inflation. A big reason why was because gas was poured on that inflation fire with those two massive spending bills, with the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act that Congresswoman Craig, you voted for. We cannot have that. We cannot go with the status quo on the economy. We need to go in a new direction. You need that. Job creators need that. Small businesses need that. That's what I'm going to be for.
Thank you both. We'll move on to the next question.
Next question is on inflation. So local businesses have been growing concerns about cost burdens due to inflation. This impacts payroll, reinvestments, prices they need to pass on to consumers, how much money they can provide to youth groups and other community ventures as well. So how do you propose that we address this concern of inflation? Joe, you'll go first.
Yeah, and it's something that we've already talked about. There's a few things we can do. We can for sure cut reckless spending. We can root out waste, fraud, and abuse like I was honored to do as a federal prosecutor. But one thing we need to do is making sure that we're growing the economic pie by reducing regulation and reducing taxes. And it's just really unfortunate. I'm a proud Minnesotan, grew up in a small town where we focus on working hard, but people are working as hard as they can and not getting ahead because of the price of inflation. And we had median income in Minnesota adjusted for inflation go down in 2023. So why is that? It's not because we aren't great with human capital in Minnesota. It's not great. It's not bad because we're not a hardworking people. It's bad because of our system. It's because of our policies. It's because of our politics. And sadly, Congresswoman Craig, you could have put our country and our policies over politics, but you didn't do that when you voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, which you said a couple of years ago would have actually reduced the deficit, but it actually grew the deficit. You could have done that when you could have voted against a reckless spending bill in the American Rescue Plan. But unfortunately, Congresswoman Craig, you didn't do that. You could have actually tried to focus on putting more money in all the folks in here's pockets so you could actually grow your businesses. That's really important, and that's what I'm going to focus on in Congress, putting more money in your pockets.
Thank you, Angie. You have 90 seconds to answer the same question.
Sure. Input costs certainly have been going up, and it's been a challenge for our business. And I've been laser focused on the ways in which we can actually reduce cost. As we all know, inflation has been a challenge. It's down to, I think, about 2.2%, but it's been a real fight. That's why I've been focused on reducing the cost of prescription drugs, on reducing, the cost of gas through supporting year-round E15. But, Joe, let's not pretend that under the previous administration, who, by the way, I worked with effectively wherever I could. In fact, President Trump signed 4 bills into law while I served in my first term in Congress. Let's not pretend that we didn't add $8.4 trillion to the deficit during the Trump administration. Everything you're talking about, and some of that I supported. And you know why? Because the CARES Act allowed the folks in this room to get access to the Paycheck Protection Program. And we were able to save employees' jobs in a number of businesses like Spiral Brewery and Hastings and Wildcats in Egan. 21,000 loans went out to this congressional district. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell 3,200 second district seniors that, sorry, your insulin can't be capped anymore because of the Inflation Reduction Act being repealed if Joe Teirab is ever in Congress.
Thank you. Joe, you have 30 seconds to respond if you wish.
Yeah, my goal is to put more money in your pockets. And so far in this campaign, I've heard 2 solutions from Angie Craig about the economy and inflation. One is to start a task force. Second is to price fix with going at price gouging. And so my question is, that is somehow blaming business owners for raising prices in an economic climate where you can't control that, business owners and job creators. That's the job of the government to get out of the way and let you thrive. I know the cost of groceries and gas and housing is through the roof. That doesn't have to do with your fault. It's not your fault. It's the government's fault for causing inflation. We can get out of the way.
Thank you. Angie, you have 30 seconds to respond if you wish.
Well, look, the people in this room also have input cost, and I think they'd like to know as well when large corporations are charging an exorbitant amount of money higher than what the rate of inflation is. And if you can't look at big company profits or big CEO pay and see that it's gone up at a rate that has outpaced everything, inflation even, then you're not paying attention. At the end of the day, I've just identified a bill that I've sponsored and written that I wrote a year ago that would reduce tax rates for small business owners in our district.
Thank you both. We'll move on to our next question.
Thank you. We'll be talking about infrastructure and investment. How will you advocate for investments in infrastructure such as roads, broadband, and utilities that are crucial for our business development and expansion in Minnesota's 2nd District? And Angie, you will go first with this one, 90 seconds.
Well, I am incredibly proud to have voted to support the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Again, Washington is broken in the sense that either party tries everything it can to do something partisan, and in the end, the only thing that actually gets done is done on a bipartisan basis. I have been focused on working with the leaders in this room, the mayors of my cities, the county commissioners in my cities, to ask each of you, what are the most important infrastructure projects or projects in our communities that are going to make the biggest difference? And we're sitting here in Lakeville, so I'll just talk about the regional public safety training facility that we were able to bring some dollars home to support in the last budget, and we've asked for, I think, $7 million more in the next budget to support our local law enforcement here in Lakeville. Investing in roads and bridges, as I said before, when I worked for St. Jude Medical, what seemed to happen is when government would invest the public sector in this physical infrastructure, then that would lead to further private sector growth as well, creating jobs all throughout our community. And you can't be in Lakeville and not talk about just how fast it's been able to grow. And of course, Rosemont also is growing at a record pace right now as a result of all of the incoming investments, with Meta building a data center there, the additional thousands of jobs that are going to be created.
Thank you, Angie. Joe?
Yeah, I think we need to, of course, devote resources to infrastructure, roads, bridges. I was, a resident of Minnesota, remembered when the 35W bridge collapsed. This is totally unacceptable as someone who's living in this country. We need to make sure that you job creators can get your products and businesses out to international markets, but that at least begins with having the transportation infrastructure to make that happen. I think it's also unfortunate that our government is getting in the way of that kind of growth. I remember talking to a job creator who, him and his wife had bought some property, I believe in Southern Dakota County, and talked about how many of the permitting processes he had to go through to actually improve his land, him and his wife's land. That's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable that right at this point, it takes about 4.5 years to get a permit, a federal permit for federal contractors. We can fast track our certification process. We can fast track our permitting process. That's something we can definitely do, and we need to ensure that. And if I would be proud enough to represent the people of the 2nd District here in Minnesota, to making sure we're bringing back some of those federal dollars here, because we Minnesotans do pay out more in taxes than we end up bringing back. So we need to make sure that we're standing strong for Minnesota and investing in our economy.
Thank you, Joe. Angie, you have 3 seconds.
Well, I also think that we need permitting reform. It's slowing down some of the progress we could be making, and I put pressure on the administration to do just that. We do need to bring our tax dollars home, and that's exactly what I've been doing over the last 6 years, even just in Dakota County. The Burnsville Public Safety Command Unit, Hastings PFAS, these are all community project funding requests. Dakota County River to River Greenway, roads in various parts of the district, Highway 13 over in Burnsville. These are actual projects underway because I've worked with you to bring those dollars back to Minnesota.
Thank you, Angie. Joe?
Yeah, I think we need to focus on, again, getting the government out of the way in terms of, can people build buildings fast enough? Can people build buildings fast enough? And right now, we're just not able to do that. And I think one big thing that is easily solvable is just reforming our permitting process and getting government out of the way by cutting regulations. And so that's what I'm going to be focused on in Congress.
Thank you both. Let's move on.
Next question is on workforce and education. So there's a growing gap between available jobs and skills of job seekers, particularly in high-demand areas of manufacturing, technology, healthcare, and law enforcement sectors. What is your plan to help address this gap? And we'll start with Joe.
Yeah, I have to say, I grew up in a small town, went to public school myself. When I was in the Marine Corps, I taught at a public community college, and I was proud to, kind of work with folks who came from different backgrounds to just get their education. And I think I do applaud Angie Craig's effort to make sure that, hey, we don't have requirements for 4-year degrees for a lot of these jobs. I remember talking to an individual, I think just last week at a chamber event, who talked about how he bought an auto repair company or auto repair shop recently, and he didn't realize that the biggest problem for him might be hiring enough employees, hiring enough mechanics. And so he has got 8 bays in his auto repair shop, and he can only hire 4 mechanics. That's just unacceptable. We need to do a better job of investing in our technical colleges and our community colleges so that we have the ability to actually fill those jobs. I think too, also, we need to reform our immigration system, because as I've talked to job creators who are likely sitting in this room, of course we have a border problem. We need to make sure people are coming here legally. But at the same time, like folks like my dad who came here in the 70s legally, we need to make sure we're getting the right people here who can fill jobs that we can't currently meet. Because that's going to be helpful not only for them, of course, but for everyone in our economy who's going to benefit from that. Because that auto repair shop owner who I talked to, he for sure would want to double his output by being able to fill those 8 bays instead of just the 4 bays. We can get that done just with a little bit of smart and common sense.
Angie, you have 90 seconds to answer the same question.
Well, career skills and technical education has been one of my highest priorities as a member of Congress. I'm so proud to partner with DCTC in so many ways, and I formerly served, before I ran for Congress, on the foundation board of Inver Hills Community College. This has always been a passion area of mine. And part of that is having responsibility for a workforce. I was responsible for 16,000 employees at St. Jude Medical at one point in time in my career there on the leadership team. And one of the biggest challenges we had across MedTech, not just at St. Jude, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, others, is that we couldn't find quality engineers. And so we developed a program that would help us develop quality engineers. And coming back to that public-private partnership, when you have a workforce, you need to make sure that your governments, your schools, we have so many great pathways programs here in our community where students can learn those technology jobs of the future. They can learn how to go into the building trades. On the advanced manufacturing front, I am the proud mother of a graduate from an advanced manufacturing trade school. And my son Josh, he started his career, and by the way, he's off my payroll, started his career in advanced manufacturing. So look, I'm putting my beliefs where my mouth is in my own congressional office. I was the very first member of Congress to eliminate all four-year degrees for every position in my congressional office because I believe so fundamentally that experience matters.
Thank you. Joe, you can have 30 seconds to respond if you wish.
Yeah, this is super important because I think it's something that's very, very common sense. We need to make sure that we're investing in jobs and careers that we just can't meet right now with our current workforce. And so whether that's making sure we reform our immigration system so that we have the right people here to actually meet those jobs, but also, strategically investing at the community college level and even high school level to make sure that those folks have those skills. I was very proud to be endorsed by NFIB, the nation's leading small business advocacy organization that's really taking the leading edge on this. And I'm proud to make sure that we're focused on those solutions for workforce and development.
Thank you. Angie, you have 30 seconds to respond if you wish.
Well, look, I think that we do need to make sure that we have a secure border and that we also have immigration. I was at Bailey Industries recently in Cottage Grove, and they talked about the need for more TN visas. There's the need for more H-2A labor, year-round labor. For example, our family farmers in this district, they need that labor. So we just need to make sure that people who are coming to this country to immigrate here are coming through the front door through H-2A visas or TN visas.
Thank you both. We'll move on to the next question, Krista.
Well, Angie, you're going to get to elaborate because you're going to start first, and guess what? It's going to be immigration. So wow. You guys, I don't even looking at my notes over here, but
no, can't see you.
Given the ongoing discussions about immigration and the implications for our country, as you both have just talked about, please share your position on immigration policy and your rationale. And Angie, again, you may go first.
Well, let me just start with the topic of border security. I actually think this is one area where the Biden administration missed the mark early. In 2022, I was telling the Biden administration publicly, standing up against them, telling them not to end Title 42 too prematurely because we were going to have an influx of migrants at the southern border, and it was going to be a humanitarian disaster. And so I have been outspoken on this issue to my own party's administration. And with that, obviously, I have gone down to the southern border, 17 Republicans and 3 Democrats. We went down there together to look at what's happening at the southern border. It took them too long, and I called for it, but Biden finally issued an executive order that seems to be stemming at least the tide down there at the moment. But unfortunately, there is a solution. It was a bipartisan, bicameral border bill that Republicans and Democrats came up with together. It achieved much of what Biden did finally under executive order. But unfortunately, the candidate for president, the former president, told his party, we don't want you to pass it because it's going to help me politically if there's a problem at the southern border. So I think we absolutely have to keep our borders secure, and that's something that I have been very outspoken with in opposition to my own party for the last 3 years.
Thank you. Joe?
Angie, Craig, you've mentioned the word outspoken a couple times, and unfortunately, words are cheap and actions matter. And you voted against a border security bill in 2023. This apparently, I think, was after you visited the border, which is maybe even more concerning because, of course, you would have heard from border security personnel who would have told you that the border was running out of control, and we know that. We've had 10 million illegal immigrants coming into our country. We need border security, and you voted against that common sense border security bill that just would have built more of the border wall. It would have given more funding to Border Patrol agents, and it would have actually just reformed our asylum process. Those things are just extremely common sense. And I say this as a guy who, maybe it's self-evident, my dad's an immigrant from Sudan. He came here legally to add to our American dream because of their American dream. And I know that we have job creators who need folks in the workforce, but we need to have a process that is legal. And Angie Craig, you voted against a common sense border security bill. You could have voted against it. You could have actually in that moment not just used words, you could have used actions with a vote, and you voted against that border security bill. That is unacceptable. You could have stood up to your party and you didn't.
Angie, would you like to respond?
Yeah, the way I would respond is that that wasn't a bipartisan border bill. The bipartisan border bill that was developed by the Senate was actually endorsed by the border agents that I stood with on the border. In 2019, I supported President Trump's request for about $1 billion in funding to build miles and miles of the border wall. There are places on the southern border that need barriers, need walls. There are other places that need people. 1,500 border agents would have been funded through the bipartisan bill, and other places we need technology to stop the illicit flow of fentanyl.
Joe, 30 seconds.
Yeah, again, actions matter. You have to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, and you haven't done that. Angie Craig, you could have voted for this bill, and you didn't. You've made comments that were extremely skeptical of a border wall. You also voted against bills like just making sure we're cutting off funding to sanctuary cities that create magnets for illegal immigrants, and you voted against that. So that would have been a common sense thing to actually make our government work more smartly and effectively and not wasting money, and you voted against that.
All right, thank you both. Let's switch gears with the next question.
Okay, we're going to jump into the heart of our district. Agriculture is an important part of our district. With 40% of the district rural farmland, and that represents about 15% of Minnesota's economy and 10% of our jobs. As you studied and listened to the residents and the businesses in the district, what are the biggest concerns that you see, and what do you plan to do to address them in Congress? Joe, you'll go first.
Yeah, the biggest problems we see is just making sure that we have a government that's working smartly for farmers. I was proud to grow up in a small town, grew up in a church where half the folks were farmers or grew up on farms. My dad worked at a beef processing plant, small town values, and I know that farmers are some of the best of us, and they really are the backbone of our country. And we had a farm bill. I know they get passed from time to time periodically. We had a farm bill that was bipartisan, right? We had a farm bill that actually strengthened commodity programs, that strengthened conservation programs and commodity insurance. We had 4 Democrats vote for this bill out of committee back in May, but Angie Craig voted against it. And so I think folks across the 2nd District have to answer the question, why would Angie Craig vote against this bipartisan farm bill? She voted against a bipartisan farm bill. Folks like Colin Peterson, actually even, and many of the major commodity groups said that this was good farm bill policy. I think we should have passed that bill. That would have strengthened farmers, because they have unique challenges that I'm very familiar with. They have unique challenges with droughts, with access to markets, with just having difficulty in getting their product to the markets that they need to. We need to support farmers. We need to support our ag economy. And sadly, Angie Craig, you didn't do that when you voted against a bipartisan farm bill.
Thank you. Angie, you have 90 seconds.
Well, I'm honored to be endorsed for re-election as I sit here today by the Minnesota Farm Bureau and the Minnesota Farmer Union. I'm the proud granddaughter of a farm foreman who actually, his owner lost the farm in the 1980s farm crisis. It's one reason why I have fought so hard to be on the Agriculture Committee every single session of Congress since I've represented this district. In fact, this is where I work often with Republican Brad Finstad, with people like Dusty Johnson from South Dakota, because we all know that it's really important to support American agriculture. There are funding mechanism problems in this farm bill. My farmers know that the farm bill that came out of the Ag Committee prioritizes peanuts and cotton over corn and soybeans. I'm a person who has fought tirelessly to expand the markets for my corn growers in ethanol and biodiesel with the bean community. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to support a farm bill that does not prioritize Minnesota farmers. And if Republicans actually had the votes for this farm bill, by the way, it would add $33 billion to our deficit. If they actually had the votes, they would have brought it to the House floor. Instead, we've named 31 post offices since this bill passed the Ag Committee. They don't have the votes.
All right, Joe, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, well, I remember being at Farm Fest when Congressman Finstad mentioned that this was a bipartisan farm bill that was good on farm policy. I remember seeing Soybean Commodity Group come out with very favorable comments about this farm bill that, again, was bipartisan. And so this is helpful because I know the job creators in here, just like farmers who have to do so many things in their jobs. You guys want certainty, right? You need to have some certainty and predictability to invest appropriately, to hire the right people. And right now, we just don't have a farm bill. And we could have a farm bill, Angie Craig, if you would have voted for it.
Angie, you have 30 seconds to respond.
We'll get to a farm bill. What we need is House Republican leadership to stop playing politics and sit down with Senate leaders on the Ag Committee and hammer out a compromise agreement. This is exactly what Republicans in Congress this session, who I work with all the time, have done with every single issue. They try it on their own, and when the bill can't pass, even within the Republican caucus, they're forced to come back and compromise and come up with a bipartisan solution. I wish we could just start with bipartisanship, but that's where we are.
Thank you both. We'll move on to the next question. Krista.
We're going to talk about innovation and technology. Cybersecurity threats are a growing concern for businesses of all sizes, and these include rapid changes in the artificial intelligence arena. What federal actions would you support to enhance cybersecurity protections for our businesses? Angie, you'll go first with this one, 90 seconds.
Well, look, I think this is a significant issue that I know all businesses are dealing with today, and it's a significant challenge because we have an ever-evolving group of criminals who are trying to steal information, hack into our systems, hold businesses for ransom, and we have a rapidly growing AI capability across our country. I want to be careful here, though. I think AI holds tremendous potential and opportunity for us in our country, particularly for businesses to be much more efficient. But I think that we need to ensure that we're doing everything we can as a Congress to make it even more difficult for these cybersecurity folks to come in and try to steal your information. We had significant issues at St. Jude Medical that we were always protecting against, and the corporate risk and security area of the business actually reported to me for a period of time, and we have to make sure that we're partnering with our local businesses and our local law enforcement to be able to find and prosecute these criminals as well.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I know our small businesses and job creators are facing unique threats that, of course, we haven't faced before, given the fact that folks across the world and Russia and other other places where we have geopolitical actors working against us are going to put into jeopardy the hard work that our job creators are doing. I know just recently from CrowdStrike and what happened recently, there are huge issues here. And I think in the same way that the federal government does have a role, in the same way that we make sure we need to protect our ports and our transportation and our ability to get our goods across the world, technology and AI is very, very similar in that way. So I think we need to make sure that there isn't too much of a government role. I think there's a room for balance here. But these are kind of the byways and the ports of the future, and we need to make sure that they're open.
Angie?
It's significant, and I think it's a good sign that you have the leading players in AI across our country actually coming to the Congress and asking us to help define the rules of the road. I think, obviously, AI holds tremendous promise. It also holds some challenges in our country when it comes to elections and other activities that I think we're going to have to stay attuned to. And so we're going to be focused on this as the technology continues to develop.
Joe, final 30 seconds on it?
Yeah, one thing I'd add is I think I saw a recent survey that maybe only a fourth of Minnesota small business companies are kind of utilizing AI in a real way in their companies. And I think that if we want to make sure that our companies are staying at the forefront and staying competitive globally, that we need to make sure that our federal government is opening up the spaces, and again, not being coming at this issue in a balanced way, but making sure that they're utilizing AI so that we're not falling behind and not being globally competitive.
Thank you both. Let's move on.
Okay. The chambers want to know about health care and benefits. So rising health care costs remain a significant concern for both employers and employees. What policies would you advocate to make health care more affordable and accessible for businesses and their workers? Joe, you get to go first.
Yeah, I think as I've talked to folks across the second district, I know that even just growing up in Minnesota, born and raised here, that the issue is not with the quality of our healthcare, with the quality of the healthcare professionals, or even our med tech companies. It's with the cost of healthcare. I remember visiting with a family farmers who are supporters of mine down in LaSoure County, and they talked about how, hey, our biggest issue facing us from a policy perspective is not necessarily some in the weeds farming policy issue. It's with the price of healthcare, because they have a family of 5. And so I think some of the things we can do are just kind of common sense, bipartisan things, making sure that any type of policies are going to be patient-centered. They're going to have some price transparency. And I think things that I've heard of more recently that are really innovative, like direct primary care, which are functionally, avenues for folks to almost have a low-cost subscription service. We have direct access to primary care providers. I think things like that will open up low price healthcare, and that's the type of solutions that I'd be focused on.
Okay, Angie, you have 90 seconds.
Sure. Well, I ran the self-insured healthcare plan at St. Jude Medical, 16,000 covered lives across the United States. And one of the biggest challenges we had was keeping the cost of compound drugs and specialty drugs within our plan at reasonable rates. And again, we had to sign the checks every time. But the most significant issue that voters are talking to me about on the doors is actually around women's health care. It's around reproductive rights. And my opponent here is the anti-abortion activist. He was an activist in college in a pro-life group. He is now spends his free time on the board of a pregnancy crisis center that won't tell women the full range of options that they have. And he also has answered a survey to Minnesota's largest pro-life organization, saying that on the day he is elected, that he will do nothing to weaken any state law in place at the time of that election. I believe that we have to return to a time where we codify Roe. 50 years before the Dobbs decision, women had reproductive freedoms across our country. And what my opponent is saying is that the states that are banning abortion, even in the case of rape, incest, and life of the mother, the only body that can do anything about that is the United States Congress. And he's saying, as a member of Congress, he has pledged not to do a damn thing about it. That's not freedom.
Joe, you now have 30 seconds to respond.
Angie, Craig, you said I spend my free time at this pregnancy resource center. That's a center that my mom, when she faced an unplanned pregnancy, went to and was given support to have me. So I think it's honestly sad and pathetic that you'd bring that up in this context. We need to support women. I'm running for Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. This is not a federal issue. This is a state issue. And we need to give this issue the grace and compassion it deserves. Not that it's used like a political wedge like you have done, provenly making misleading statements as proven by WCCO. and KSTP. It's sad and unfortunate, Angie Craig.
Angie, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Joe, I'm glad your mom made the decision that was right for her. Now,
I feel
we're
very
just
doubtful about that, Angie Craig.
that you let every other woman in America make the decision that is right for them. At the end of the day, this is about freedom. It's about keeping politicians and governments out of your doctor's office, and you've pledged as a member of Congress that you won't do that, the only body that could change that in our nation.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
We're going to move on to talk about security and safety. Over the last several years, we have seen mounting deadly incidents in our streets, our schools, and our workplaces. And actually right here, even in Lakeville, we've seen our schools invest in infrastructure to keep our kids safe. So what specific law changes do you support to help curb this trend, keep our students, families, and workers safe, and how will you drive them? Angie, you will go first with this one.
Well, look, public safety is the first priority, it should be, of any elected official. And I am so proud to be endorsed by the rank and file police officers of Minnesota in MPPOA. This is the second election that I've been endorsed by them, and it's an honor to have their support in my reelection. You know, specifically, I want to say that I can't come to a debate and not recognize the community of Burnsville in Dakota County, and Paul and Matthew and Adam, who lost their lives protecting our communities. You know what people in our community want? They want to feel safe. And that's why I've been so focused on the First Center here in Lakeville, making sure that we can get them resources. We just found out a couple of weeks ago that we got community-oriented policing, federal grants to 2 police departments here in 3 police departments for 6 new officers. In Lakeville, we just found out we've got 15 new firefighters that we're going to fund. I've been laser focused on making sure that our officers in our community have the resources they need to keep our communities safe. And I am very proud that that has earned me the endorsement of rank and file police officers in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Angie. Joe?
Yeah, Angie Craig, you put a lot of weight on the MPPOA endorsement, but let's talk about individual issues, because I think the folks here can think about those issues. You know, stepping back, my job as a state prosecutor was to put domestic abusers behind bars. My job as a federal prosecutor, when I was promoted to that position, was to put cartel-linked drug traffickers behind bars, the Feeding Our Future fraudsters behind bars, a cop killer behind bars. And I think it's sad and unacceptable that there's no coincidence that assaults against police officers in the last few years have doubled, because we have a feckless political class that wants to charge cops more than criminals. I would never have gotten swept up in the defund the police fervor like you did, Angie Craig, when you voted for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And you can give me that look you gave me, but you voted for that bill. That would have kneecapped law enforcement. That bill would have opened up qualified immunity so any cop, and if there's any cops in here providing security, and thank you so much for what you're doing here, that would have opened them up to lawsuits, up and down. That would have dictated to law enforcement agencies that they could have been dictated policies by the ACLU and other defunded police groups. And worst of all, before whatever you're talking about now, it would have actually removed the ability of local law enforcement agencies from getting military-style equipment like the Bearcat that saved lives there in Burnsville. You voted for that bill. So you can flip-flop now, you can explain it now, you can talk the talk, but you can't walk the walk when you had a vote to actually stand by law enforcement.
Thank you, Joe. Angie.
Joe, if you wanted to run against a defund the police Democrat, you should have moved to some other congressional district, because that's not me, and you know it. After Burnsville, I listened to all of you, and I've actually introduced a bill that would remove all restrictions on tactical vehicles across our country, and I'm advocating for it. And the police officers in this room know that I have made the commitment publicly out loud through the press, and I call out other politicians who speak ill of police in this state and across our country. I have made the commitment that I will not vote to remove qualified immunity.
Thank you, Angie. Joe?
You made the commitment after you voted for it. You made the commitment after you voted to get rid of qualified immunity, to make sure that small local law enforcement can't get Bearcat vehicles. Again, can law enforcement trust you, Angie Craig? I don't know if they can trust you. And you know what? I've spent hours, days, working hand in hand with law enforcement to put hardened criminals behind bars. Every one of them has told me, we just need you to have our back. Right now, we can't have feckless politicians like you that don't have their back.
Okay, thank you both for that. We're running just slightly ahead of our time. We're gonna slip one more question in for you guys, one final question.
That's right. The categories we provide you with smart moderators, we learned from some of the folks in the press corps up there. You need to hold an out. What happens if something comes up that's topical? Well, today's Star Trib says Israel escalates in Gaza and Lebanon. And so there's a tremendous amount of pressure in the Middle East. What do you see the role of the United States in the Middle East given the current events? The question is, what specific actions would you advocate for balancing military support for Israel with diplomatic efforts in the region? Joe, you get to go first.
We need to stand by Israel 100%. We need to stand by our allies 100%. I know that because when I was honored to serve in the United States Marine Corps for 5 years on active duty and deployed once to Iraq, we were going against ISIS. And at that time, I knew to my core that sometimes there are people in this world that aren't like you and me. They don't respond to negotiation. They only respond to force. And right now, sadly, we're seeing our world in chaos because we've projected weakness and not strength with the Biden-Harris agenda that's been supported by Angie Craig. We need to stand by our allies like Israel, as Iran spreads their tentacles across the Middle East. We need to stand against Russia, of course, and making sure that we're not going to have a blank check to Ukraine, but that we're supporting efforts to go against our geopolitical foes, and then that we're standing up to China. And we can't have them threatening Taiwan. The world needs peace, and we get peace through strength, and that strength comes from the United States of America. We need to support our military, build up our military, and we cannot undercut in any way the effort that Israel has in defeating evil. We saw evil in Hamas. We can defeat evil if we support them 100%.
Okay, Angie, 90 seconds.
I think we have to stand by our ally Israel. You know, Israel on October 7th, it's a tough day in America. You know, my wife is Jewish. 2 of our kids are Jewish. And this is a really personal day because Israel was attacked. Anti-Semitism is on the rise here in America. And at the end of the day, it's one of the worst days in the history of Israel. You know, they're being attacked by Hamas in Gaza, attacked by Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is a time where we stand by our friends. We stand by our allies. And as a member of Congress, I voted to send defense supplies. When this administration tried to pause a shipment to Israel, I stood with Republicans on this issue. Because at the end of the day, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. It is the only Middle Eastern country where I would feel safe taking my own family, my wife, our 4 sons. And I will always stand with our ally, Israel. Someday, probably not today, because we see what's happening in the world, we need to move ourselves, Israel needs to move to a 2-state solution, which is the only solution in the Middle East.
Thank you. Joe, you have 30 seconds.
We always need to stand with Israel, and we did that in early of January 2020 when the United States did a targeted elimination of Iranian General Soleimani, who was responsible for the deaths of thousands of innocent people across the world, including 100 Americans. And it was sad, Angie Craig, again, talking the talk, walking the walk. You undercut the elimination of General Soleimani with a tweet. And what we cannot do is we cannot talk about ceasefires and de-escalation and undercut Israel's full ability to defend themselves as a nation. We are a strong Israel ally, and we have to support them.
Angie, you have 30 seconds.
We should stand with our ally Israel, which is exactly what I've done as a member of Congress representing the 2nd District of Minnesota.
All right, thank you both. So now we're into closing comments. Thank you both for everything you've had to say. Candidates, you have 2 minutes. Angie, you started with opening comments, so Joe, you start with closing comments.
Well, thank you so much again, John and Krista, for moderating this, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Congresswoman. This is a really important election. This is an election that's going to determine where our country goes. We can go 2 directions, right? We can go with the status quo, or we can go a new direction. We can go with the status quo in the economy, with a Congresswoman who voted lockstep with the Biden-Harris agenda that's only poured gas on the inflation fire. I think we can go a different direction by cutting reckless spending, by actually rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, and yes, extending those tax cuts from 2017. I think we can go a new direction on the border to say, look, we are a country of immigrants. We need a robust workforce, but we need some law and order on the border. We can't go with someone who's showed signs of not strength on the border. We can go a different direction on crime, making sure that we're keeping our streets safe, making sure we're not giving people reasons to flee Minnesota. It's so sad as a proud Minnesota, born and raised, to see people fleeing Minnesota, young professionals who have a tax climate and a political climate that's not good for them. We can go a different direction. You know, and I'm sure this might come up on your comments, but it's just sad and unfortunate, again, that there are political wedge issues that you've used, Congresswoman Craig, about abortion. And this is, again, it's a personal issue to me, given my mom choosing life, going to a crisis pregnancy center. This is not a federal issue. It is a state issue, and you cannot run on your record. There aren't ads running constantly about the economy, how great it is, and inflation, on the border. There aren't ads on those. But what is deep to my core is this: the strength of America is with you. It's with job creators. It's with middle-class families. My goal as a congressperson, if I'd be honored to earn your vote, is to give you more power. We don't need more money with the government. I know, working as a federal prosecutor, that the government's not great at spending money. But when you have money and power, that's how America thrives. That's going to be my goal in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Angie, you have 2 minutes for your closing comments.
Well, thank you so much to the Regional Chamber. It's such an honor to be here, and to the partner chambers as well. Common Ground Committee has ranked me in the top 3% of all bipartisan members of Congress. ProPolitico has said that I am the 6th most independent Democrat in the entire Democratic Party, and that's out of 214. I've stood up to the Biden administration on issues such as law enforcement, on border security, and in support of our family farmers. Last year, according to NBC News, I voted against the Biden administration 30% of the time. I am an independent voice for this district. You know, people in this room, we've been through a lot together the last several years. I was there in the Congress under President Trump. I worked with him to get PPP money out to you. And then I worked to get the chambers included in the American Rescue Plan, those 501c6 organizations. I've been to so many of your businesses. I've heard your stories. I know more than anybody what the American dream looks like because I lived it. I worked my way up to the executive team of a Fortune 500 company from a trailer park. I know what that's like. And for the rest of my time serving you, you better bet I'm going to be laser focused on listening to you. We need a new post office in Lakeville and Farmington. We're getting a new post office in New Prague. We're getting new roads and bridges across this congressional district. I'm bringing your tax dollars home for the first time in 30 years. It has been such an honor to represent this congressional district over the last 6 years, and it would be a true honor to represent you for the next 2 years in the United States Congress. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Krista, bring us home.
Wonderful. Well, on behalf of the Chamber Partners of the 2nd Congressional District, we thank you both, not only for your desire to serve, but for spending time with us today so that we can learn more about your priorities and how you would support our businesses, their employees, and their families. So thank you both very much for being here. Thank you to our live audience and members of the media in attendance, and everyone has made this event possible today. Just a reminder to those in our live audience that due to scheduling, there will not be an opportunity to interact with the candidates, so we do ask that you exit the Arts Center immediately following our broadcast here today.
So just as a reminder, none of the Congressional District 2 Chamber partners have endorsed nor will endorse a candidate in this or any political race this year. That choice rests with you, the voters. So do your civic duty. And remember to vote on November 5th. Thank you, and have a great fall supporting all of your CD2 chamber businesses to keep our regional economy strong. And thank you, candidates.
Your biking adventure begins at visitigh.com.
Overwhelmed by letters, ads, and calls about Medicare? We'll help you cut through the clutter. You can connect with a Medicare advisor today at Blue Cross